Good morning. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Welcome to Westchester County Airport. We're here today to make some announcements that we think are important to the Westchester community. I'm joined by Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins, by County Legislator Nancy Barr, who represents the 6th Legislative District that includes most of Harrison, all of Rybrook, and Portchester, and is the home host of where the airport is located, and the Supervisor Mayor for the town village of Harrison, Ron Belmont. And thank you all for being with us today. What we're here to announce is that we are working through and delivering on many of the commitments that we made early in this administration when we came into office in 2018. In January of 2018, just 3 years ago this month, Ken and I came into our executive positions. Nancy, as a new county legislator with a new majority in the Board of Legislators, looked at the Westchester County Airport, and we understood that we had two major realities that had to be addressed. One, that this airport is an essential transportation hub. It is a generator of business, and it is a generator of jobs. It's an important employer and an important business here in Westchester County, and it has a very valid benefit to those of us who live and work in Westchester County. And secondly, that the county airport, as a neighbor to the people who live in Harrison, in Rybrook, in North Castle, in White Plains, and for those under the flight path that comes here, that also includes places like Chappaqua and Armonk and Pleasantville and so forth, that this was a large neighbor and could be at times an intrusive neighbor. And so we needed to make sure that this airport, first of all, did not expand, which we've honored that commitment, that it maintained itself under government control so that the town supervisor, the county legislature, the county executive branch would continue to manage the airport and be responsive to the people of Westchester County. And then in addition to that, that we make sure that we make this as friendly a neighbor as is possible, given the fact it is an airport. And those are very oftentimes conflicting needs and conflicting pressures. But we made certain commitments that we thought were logical and reasonable, and now we're here to talk about being able to fulfill some of those commitments. We're going to talk today about two particular aspects of what we're dealing with, which is the upgrading of all of the permanent airport noise monitors that have been integrated into the complaint handling system, the way people go about complaining when they hear noise that they think is obtrusive. And then also that the Board of Legislators has authorized the request that we made for $3.75 million in a bond act to complete the remediation measures at one of our outfall pipes, outfall number 7, as part of the county's storm drain replacement program. And this is important because it's mandated by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and it's also part of the strategy that we have to protect the groundwater that comes out of this airport, because we have a drinking watershed to our north, and we have the Blind Brook that leads down into the Long Island Sound that goes to our south, and both of those bodies of water are important and fragile bodies of water that we want to make sure to protect. As I mentioned before, this airport is an economic driver. It sits, in a combination of jurisdictions: Harrison, Rybrook, White Plains, North Castle, all in this clustered areas. The dotted lines of these communities intersect along the property line of all of this. And it has an impact on those communities, but it also has an impact on the business community of Westchester County. Westchester County is home to IBM, is home to PepsiCo, is home to MasterCard and Regeneron, and it represents a major home for corporate entities, large and small, the small businesses of Westchester County. Some of them are not major U.S. corporations, but they employ hundreds of our people who live in these different communities and pay taxes and shop in these communities. And so it's important for us to recognize that that was the original reason all those years ago why what was once a military field was turned into a commercial airport and provided both two levels of transportation: commercial transportation here in this terminal, where individuals can book flights to different locations. Once we're out of the pandemic, that becomes a much more vigorous portion. And the ever-growing portion of general aviation, and primarily corporate general aviation, where the IBMs and the MasterCards and the PepsiCos house their equipment so that their corporate executives can fly as they need to on business, and then also so that smaller organizations can have access to air flights that are not part of the commercial air network, but a very essential part of doing business. Businesses have relocated to Westchester County because this airport is here and it provides an opportunity. So we're trying to balance both of those two things. We talked about some commitments in the beginning of our tenure, and similarly and separately, Nancy and the Board of Legislators also analyzed, looked at these different issues, and talked about some of the things we intended to do back in August of 2018. We talked about making sure that we had an up-to-date set of noise monitoring equipment. The noise monitoring equipment that was here when we walked in the door was not adequate to properly track the noise, and if you don't track the noise, you can't make a case to the Federal Aviation Administration about air flights, traffic patterns, and so forth. And then we also wanted to make sure that the system of reporting complaints was up to date, so that if a person is frustrated and they lodge a complaint, that the complaint is properly lodged and the system can be tracked, and then we can look at what we have to do to take care of that. On the area of air quality, the county has completed an air emissions inventory, and if you compare where we are today to 2007 base numbers, we have significant reduction in air emissions because we have reduced the total number of flights combined with airport improvements. In 2007, 14 years ago, may seem like a long time ago, but the bottom line is we have had years that were much worse than recent years here at the airport for noise and pollution. And so you can't look at it where we are today, and not just because we're closed today, but you have to look at it from a progression standpoint where those concerns were much higher 20 years ago and have been consistently reduced over time. And then on water quality, we all accept the fact, and this, by the way, is accepted by the businesses and the people of the airport community as well, that we have to make sure that there is no pollution of our water systems in this area. There isn't anybody here who isn't committed to the future of the airport that isn't also committed to the water quality protection of our drinking watershed. And so we've reinstated through an executive order ongoing water testing, which is something that hadn't happened before, to test for potential pollutants. And we've been very focused on the PFAS. That's an acronym for a rather long, unpronounceable a word in science that represents the type of pollution that has been found here because of use of firefighting foam 40, 50 years ago on this site. But the PFAS site characterization and the remediation, we are in compliance with New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. We wanted to make sure that we were doing that which we knew we had to do. So we didn't fight. We didn't push back. We didn't go to court. We sat and negotiated out what would the proper remediation be on this PFAS pollution, and that's exactly where we are today. I want to thank our county attorney, who is not with us today, John Nona. He has taken leadership on that issue, and it's very important that that we understand that this was a voluntary effort by the county to meet the environmental protection quality standards that were set by the state on behalf of all of the people. And when we reinstituted groundwater testing, we put ourselves in a position where we could know a problem before it got too big. One of the biggest situations you deal with, you know this in your own home. If you see a little brown spot on a ceiling, there's a reason for that brown spot. Something is bringing water into your ceiling. You can ignore it, and you can get away with it for a while, but sooner or later, that roof is going to come down into the room. That ceiling is going to come down in the room. You know that. And so the groundwater testing is an early detection effort to make sure we spot pollution before it happens, and we know it's there, and then we have time to correct it, and potentially before it's all done. And then finally, we've made a commitment as well. This is a commitment we've had to put on hold because of the pandemic. And it's a commitment that we've made in concert with the Board of Legislators, and that is to make sure that we do an updated master plan on this airport. Now, to do an updated master plan, there's a lot of technical study that goes into it, but most importantly, there's public dialogue and public involvement. Now, we've gotten through the COVID now almost a year in certain areas with public involvement using, WebEx and Zoom mechanisms, so forth. But this airport is too important to try to have public dialogue over something that's important as a master plan and do it sort of, in a half-baked way. So we have had to postpone that. We're hoping as soon as we see the lifting of the COVID restrictions, we can gather in some larger groups and smaller groups that we'll be able to restart that program. It will take some time to go through the whole process. Ultimately, it develops a master plan that goes before the Board of Legislators for their scrutiny and review, and will also include a state environmental review. It's called SECRA, another acronym. The SECRA review process will be completed. The last time that was done in Westchester County was 1989. And so we intend, as soon as we can, but not rushing it, to make sure we do that up to date. And we think when we do these things and more, these aren't the only things that we can do, that we're showing that we're good stewards of the airport, we're good stewards of the business and transportation value of the airport, but at the same time we're concerned and trying to address the concerns of noise pollution and water pollution in all of these things. In the area of putting together the Bond Act and then passing it, Nancy Barr, as a member of the Board of Legislators, has focused on those issues, analyzed them. She's worked with her colleagues, the leadership of the board, and her own chairwomanship of her committee to try to make sure these issues are properly focused. So I'd like Nancy to talk a little bit about how the Board of Legislators has functioned in making sure that the money is available to do these things. Legislator Nancy Barr.
Thank you so much, George. I just want to say, first of all, and George is always so thorough in his explanations, but I do want to say what a great partner the county executive and his team have been with the legislators and with my district in particular on matters related to the airport. That clearly was the most important issue to people back in 2017 when I first was elected. And it continues to be something that many people are very wary about. We recognize it's a wonderful resource, the airport, but it also is a great responsibility. And in order to take that responsibility seriously, we need to know, what is actually happening there and the types of measures that we've been able to do with the county executive's help are really measures that will help us keep tabs on the health and safety of the residents vis-a-vis the airport. In terms of the $3.75 million bond that was passed recently by the legislature, this is something, as the county executive explained, is the result of the fact that we had, at one point, the Air National Guard here at this airport, and they did a lot of testing, or rather a lot of training related to putting out fires. And they would start fires, and then they would use their firefighting foam to put those fires out. Many years later, we find out that foam, as well as many other things, have these contaminants, as George explained, PFAS contaminants, that are considered to be forever chemicals, and they stay wherever they were for forever, and they don't break down, and they actually have been linked to some health problems. So it's become a priority to make sure that the drinking water that's found in the reservoirs near the airport is free of these chemicals, and to make sure it stays that way. To date, the levels are undetectable in the reservoir, and we want to make sure it stays that way. And so this bond is to fortify the storm drains that carry the water from the airport to the reservoirs, and to make sure that any of those chemicals that are in the groundwater do not end up being carried into the reservoir when it rains. So this is really an important part of protecting the drinking water for the city and also for some of the residents here in Westchester. And the legislature was more than happy to pass this bond act. And for those of you who are concerned about the money, this money will be ultimately coming from the airport funds, and is appropriate use of that money. So I'm happy to be able to tell you about this, and I look forward to continuing to work on all of these matters related to the airport. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. We also made a commitment in the beginning of 2018 to reconfigure the nature of the relationship that we have as a county government with local governments, villages, towns, and cities. And I had the privilege of being a councilman nearby Rye City quite a while ago. And in that location, we were next to some county-owned facilities. And I always felt left out of the county making decision processes. And I kind of thought in the back of my mind, if I ever had the opportunity to change the relationship between the county and the municipal governments, I would try to do that. So this position as county executive gave me that opportunity. And I turned to the local governments, the cities, the towns, and the villages that ring this airport, and said, we want to make sure that you have a seat at the table as policy is being discussed. There's an airport advisory board that was created a number of years ago, and in the creation of that airport advisory board, the appointments were belonging to the county executive to be confirmed by the Board of Legislators, but they indicated that they wanted to see representation in the document from people who lived in different communities around the area. But when I saw that, I decided to go a step further, not to pick myself, the person who lives in each of these different communities in Mount Pleasant or in the town of Rye or in the town village of Harrison or what have you, but to let the local government officials recommend the person that they would like to see us put on the board, and without any further review, put that person on the board, knowing that that person would have dialogue with the town board, the village board, or the city council, and that we would have a different kind of relationship up here. And that if there were issues that were in hand, issues that are being given to the airport advisory board to look at and to comment on, that the town governments and the local governments would have that link. And I wanted that to happen, and we were able to do that. Ron Belmont has been the mayor supervisor of the town of Harrison now for a number of years. He is a great booster for Harrison, which is the town that my mother grew up in, and I'm honored to have represented Harrison at other times in my career. And of course, Harrison is a big community. It stretches from the border of White Plains on one end all the way down to where Rye City and Mamaroneck Village meet. And so neighborhoods, large neighborhoods of Harrison are very directly affected by this. Maybe not all of them, but certainly very big parts of it. But he has been a partner in these things. And by partnership, I mean we work together. And if we find that something that we're going to do is not to the liking of the town, we hear from it. But that enables us to address the issue early rather than fight a rearguard action later on when we find out that we've never included the municipalities at the table. So in the same way that we want the members of the Board of Legislators to have the ability to show leadership on this issue, so do we want Ron Belmont and the town board in Harrison and his colleagues as well in the other communities. So I'd like him to say a few words. This is his time. I'm not exactly sure, Ron, if we're in your part of the town and this part of the airport, but it's your town for the sake of argument. If Mike Scalero or Gary Zuckerman have a problem, I'll work that out a little bit later on. Anyway, the mayor supervisor of Harrison, Ron Belmont.
Thank you. Thank you, George. And I'm delighted. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited about the list of things you've put together to correct or improve here at the airport for many reasons. On a personal note, I have a son relocated to Charlotte, and I fly out of this airport to Charlotte. And I had voiced my opinion about the conditions of the airport, and I know that will be addressed. I've never wanted the airport to be expanded, but I want it to be improved, and I think we're on the proper means here to make it a first-class airport. As we said, this is home to many large corporations. The wealth that we have here in Westchester probably is second to none, and airport should reflect that. And hopefully, with these list of improvements, it will downstairs in the lobbies and so on and so forth. Also, we've been doing a renaissance on Westchester Avenue. The past few years, we had Lifetime Fitness, Wegmans, national companies come into Westchester Avenue. This airport is a vital hub that also helped us rejuvenate Westchester Avenue. I thank you for that. Keep this airport the way it is, and hopefully we'll continue to rejuvenate which was once called the Platinum Mile, to make it a Platinum Mile once again. So I thank you, and good luck with all these improvements.
Thank you, Ron. I also want to recognize that Peter Shearer is with us here, who is our airport manager. I don't know how he doesn't have a head full of gray hair, but managing an airport during a pandemic cannot be a walk in the park. So we appreciate his solid work. And we have a lot of issues to deal with. Just to give you one example, the President Biden, has issued a travel ban from certain countries to try to protect against coronavirus outbreak. And that travel ban involves interdiction at airports. Well, this airport is one of the many airports in the nation. We may not think of it in terms of comparable to, say, JFK or Newark, perhaps LaGuardia, where you know you have international flights coming in. We don't have commercial international flights coming in here. But we do have general aviation jets that can be reached from Western Europe into this airport. Given the size and length of the runway, the equipment can be accommodated. And so now we turn to Peter and the team, the Avports team that we work with, and say, okay, here's another headache. Try to solve this. Let's make sure we've got testing and PPE and all the different things that every other institution has to happen. So I want to thank you and your team for the work that you're doing here, and those who are with us here today and those are elsewhere in the building. Just to summarize this as well, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow with representatives from the Sierra Club. George Klein has offered some very innovative ideas of things we could do here at the airport, how we could advance solar, how we could advance green technology, and a host of other different things. We're going to meet with our friends from the Sierra Club, discuss what's possible as we go forward, see how much of this we can implement on a practical level. We have worked with the various vendors here. They have gone through a very difficult time with very little traffic, if any at all, here in the main building. We've worked with them on the rental amounts that they need to pay to the county under normal circumstances. When time is booming and their revenues are strong, and they pay a proportionate rentals to be here, but that's not the case now. So we're trying to show a flexibility in our appreciation for business in that regard. And I would also say, although we are New York State and Greenwich is in Connecticut, another state, we don't treat our next-door neighbors in Greenwich as if they're somehow foreign affairs to us. They, too, are residents of the area. They, too, use the airport. They, too, are affected by the airport. And we certainly want first selectmen and the leaders of Greenwich and those in Connecticut in general to know that they, too, have a voice in the decisions that we make going forward, because this is a regional airport. A lot of our business does come from Connecticut of all sort of nature. And ultimately, when the pandemic lifts, we're going to need to have in place certain protections. We're going to need to deal with the general aviation volume of flights, takeoffs, and landings, see how we can reduce that number to try to reduce the amount of those impacted, and then also to try to get the FAA to be as creative as they can be in what they control, because they control the skies. They control the routes of how planes come in and land and take off, and they obviously care, as they should. Number one is safety. But there are concerns as well. When you authorize those types of things, there are noise impacts by doing those things, and there must be creative ways, because you're running a nationwide air traffic system. There must be ways to help us here in Westchester reduce the noise by adjusting the arrival and departure patterns, if that can be done. We're in a very complicated airspace over the New York metropolitan area. I can't even begin to imagine what it would be like to be an air traffic controller and deal with the congested skies and the other major airports and the other minor airports in the region. But we are looking for that kind of assistance as well, because we're trying to satisfy the desire to have a less noisy airport, a quieter airport, and at the same time maintain our business and activity in that direction. So we don't have any questions from members of the press. If there are any members watching and they have any questions, we're happy to do individual interviews, any of us here. You can reach out to Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, 995-2932, and she'll be happy to set up any appropriate follow-up conversations that we have. And we intend to have additional updates on where we are at the airport. We are very deeply into the COVID issue without any question, and the vaccines and so forth, but we are trying to work on all policy issues before the county. We work cooperatively with the Board of Legislators, with the municipal governments, and hopefully together we'll continue to make some progress. So with that, I thank you for watching. Invite your follow-up conversation. We will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock to give an update on COVID situation for Westchester County. We will expect to have some type of an announcement in concert with the county executives of Dutchess, Orange, Rockland, and Putnam County relative to Section 1 high school sports. That may happen within the next 24, certainly no more than the next 48 hours. And we'll continue to try to dialogue on every area of public policy. And we invite you to go on the various websites of the county administration, the Board of Legislators website, to discuss, identify and discuss any public policy issue. I'm George Latimer, County Executive. Thank you for your time. Have a good day and stay safe.